Hey everyone. This episode touches on some pretty confronting material related to psychiatric harm and delves into some very real experiences within the psychiatric system. If any of the content in today's episode feels like it's too much for you, feel free to give this one a miss. We'll leave some resources you can contact if needed in the show notes below. And remember, we're all in this together.
It's a Minefield is an audio exploration produced by us, people who ride the waves of mental and emotional distress.
Our expertise comes from our lived experience, and these are the stories you'll hear, along with those who are on the journey with us.
The roller coaster of mental health can be lonely and overwhelming, but we're all in this together and would love for you to join us.
Hey Hannah, hey Leon.
Hi.
Yo. Have you heard that when people are seeking support at a really low point, that sometimes they can actually come out worse and more suicidal, and that their mental health challenges are exacerbated by the system that is there to support them?
I mean, it's not something that I'd ever really thought that deeply about before. I think it's something that maybe I assumed might be happening, but after seeing it kind of happening firsthand with you, Leon, in recent weeks, I'm kind of been appalled and quite shocked by what goes on in places like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's Chris kindly and beautifully interviewed me about those experiences that I went through most recently, and I also got to chat to my friend Sophie, Dr. Sophie Isabel, who's a specialist in trauma-informed care and those sorts of things. So I look forward to sharing my story with you, and to hear what Sophie has to say as well.
I'm looking forward to hearing it, Leon.
So the theme of this episode is psychiatric harm, and we've both been psych patients, seen a bunch of psychiatrists, good, bad and otherwise, and you're going to share your experience of recent psychiatric harm.
Yeah. I guess a year ago I identified as someone who had been through the public hospital system and kind of considered myself as the golden child, and the evidence of this system works, and you know, felt confident to present to clinicians, you know, you make a difference, you can really, I'm living proof of that, until this year. And the opposite happened. And I guess what it's hard to talk about.
Was it one thing that happened, or was it a series of smaller injustices and traumas that became like something bigger and more harmful?
So earlier this year, my dear father passed away, and several things collided, I guess, and there was that. There was a huge amount of planning for his funeral. There was a lot of trauma that came up before that around family stuff, and then interest rates went up and I couldn't afford to live. And without going into details, I ended up becoming conscious in a psychiatric ward in a hospital that was designed, I guess, for people with drug-induced psychosis or serious drug-related damage, which I was. The troublesome thing is that this ward exists for 48 hours. Something that's happening nationwide right now is called bed block, meaning there are not enough psychiatric beds for the amount of people who need them. So the bed you land in is the bed you stay in until they find a bed in the psychiatric ward. And, you know, at the first few days I thought, fair enough, yeah, I need a psych ward. That's what I need. But the financial issues got resolved, and the things that, the precipitating things that made me want to kill myself kind of got fixed by the third day. And I told the team that and was ignored. And then the fourth and the fifth day. And to describe this place was just, I couldn't get out of bed. There was a catheter in me, and there were thin curtains. There were 8 beds, and there were people who were mostly in drug-induced psychosis. So there was it was very noisy. Police ran in and out throughout my time there. And I just remember all I wanted to do was cry about my dead dad. And then there was that thing about the lower I appeared, the more likely I would be to remain incarcerated there. So I was in this paradox of, I'll put on Guy Smiley and say, look, I'm okay, knowing I was worse. And it was a situation where telling the truth of being worse would keep me there. Lying about feeling okay would make me worse. And it didn't matter because I just wasn't believed. I wasn't believed. And in the end, I just remember the condescension of some of the clinicians and the kindness of many of them. But the eye rolling when I talk about, I want to get out and finish my master's degree. I lost work. I lost so much in that experience. And no matter what, I wouldn't be allowed to leave. And I kept being reminded, you are a voluntary patient. So I responded, well, then I would like to be discharged immediately. To which I was told, then we will have to schedule you. Now, I'm not sure about what the law says about that. And that's something I'll find out. But paradoxically, after living a life without the comfort of, without suicidal thinking bringing me comfort, I left that hospitalisation with my only self-soothing mechanism was, for a long time, to think about suicide. It came back as self-soothing as a result of that hospitalisation. And is this a dumpster fire that can't be resolved? Turns out it isn't.
5 years ago, Leon sought support through the public mental health system during suicidal crisis and had a very different experience.
5 years ago, I was in the exact same position. I was in a hospitalisation. I was 12 days in bed block awaiting a psychiatric bed. My life at that time really sucked, and it wasn't a life I enjoyed. As opposed to earlier this year, the life I've assembled is a life I quite enjoy. And, things collided together to create this suicide attempt, which emotionally was resolved in days. But those years ago when I was in bed block, I didn't care really about staying there. But after those 12 days of bed block where I was absolutely had zero hope, I remember walking into this psychiatric hospital, and it was a different one, obviously. And the first question asked of me by the nurse who admitted me was, "What brings you here?" And from that point, I was met with kindness, real collaboration. I will never forget my first meeting with the psychiatrist who I guess on paper scheduled me. And there wasn't talk of diagnosis. There wasn't talk of... The question was, what brings you here? Tell us about your life. And the only point, actually, interestingly, that they interrupted me was after they'd asked me what medications I'd been taking and, what meds was I on. And I listed 5. And they said, I don't want to coerce you into doing anything, but what about, you're currently scheduled, what about we take you off them one by one and see what happens? Spoiler warning, it worked. The medications weren't doing any help that whole time. So I came out of being scheduled 5 years ago on less meds than I ever had been. So what's the difference between these two experiences? I guess you could say collaboration. I perceive every clinician who works in the public mental health system as being a kind person who's overworked, underpaid, means well, and they often know that they're working in a system that is harming others and frankly harming themselves. I believe that to be the case because I teach and work with those clinicians as colleagues, but it's a really bad situation that we're currently in this place where people are being damaged badly. When people get damaged badly by psychiatric harm, it's catastrophic. When people get healed by it, it's life-changing. And I've had both of those things happen. Today, where do I sit? Both of those stories are equally true. Both of those stories are equally true. But I'd be terrified of ever calling an ambulance or admitting suicidality at this point in my life. I'd be terrified. The people that we know who are two friends close to us who have passed away in the last 12 months by suicide had an encyclopedic knowledge of the mental health system, of a variety of psychiatric treatments, put tens of thousands of dollars and hours and years and decades into well-being and knew what they chose not to get into, and that's the mental health system.
It's really unacceptable that if you are really struggling with mental health or suicidality, that the place where you're told to go to for support, for help, can do so much damage and has done so much damage, and can, as you told about the admission 5 years ago, can also help and can also be a turning point. And it's really fucking shitty that is down to, it seems, chance. And it doesn't seem like there's any consistency or any kind of guarantee of the experience that you are going to have. And that's fucking unfair when it's supposed to be a safe place. And most people who go through mental health struggles find it hard to feel safe. And then the place they're told to go is often more unsafe.
It's so hard to sit with both of those experiences. One turned my life around and saved my life and filled it with hope and gave me a presence and a future that I loved. It was the corner that needed turning. The other one sadly, which was more recent, the moment I left that hospital, I was non-verbal for 2 weeks. I couldn't spell my name. I thought I had brain damage, and I checked the discharge summary because they did an MRI upon entry, and no, there was no brain damage due to, drugs or anything like that. But I understood now, and we're talking about 4 months later, that what I was going through was symptoms of severe trauma, of psychiatric trauma. And I don't... It's so it would be so lovely and convenient and wonderful if we could pinpoint who or what to blame. We can blame the medical paradigm. We can blame lack of resourcing, which is true. We can blame. I don't blame clinicians. I think every single person did the job that they had signed up to do properly, but sadly, that sometimes is more lethal than not.
One thing the mental health system really struggles with is being able to sit with uncertainty and actively listen to the people who access their services for support during the most difficult time of their lives.
What I can say, though, is that we do know that being risk tolerant and listening and believing me is better than being risk averse. When people kept me in hospital, were they actually genuinely concerned about my well-being or about their reputation or about them covering their ass and retaining their employment? That's what I do wonder. It's so hard to sit with it. It's so hard to... I'm still really trying to work it out. It's only been recently that I've been able to talk about this with any level of clarity, but I don't have an answer. But what I can say is that collaboration, kindness, authenticity does exist in the mental health system. We both work in the mental health system. Keep that in mind. I think the definition of gaslighting is when you're told, you're so crazy, your opinions don't count. They say that, in gaslighting is in these negative relationships, romantic relationship. Often the man says, you're crazy. But that's literally what happens in psychiatry. You're too crazy, you're too mad for your opinions to be worthy of listening to. And that's the absolute definition of gaslighting, and that's something I've experienced.
Yeah, I think losing your voice is so common within the mental health system. I see it every day at work. People who are silenced in small ways, in terms of if they're, say, ignored by a nurse if they're knocking on the door, to big ways. For example, if they ask to change their treating team or have a new psychiatrist because they don't have a good rapport with their current psychiatrist or they don't feel comfortable with them, that's often refused. So there's a lot of little microaggressions, so not answering the door when somebody's knocking, and then there's the bigger kind of aggressions as well. And you're almost punished for being in there.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that if you break a rule, the result is you won't be allowed leave, which is kind of admitting that being in there is punishing. It's kind of admitting that. And, I One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest sadly is not history. But there are places at work there are places that do work. In both places, I'm referring to public systems. I haven't had great experience in the private hospital system, but that's another story. Being authentic with your thoughts and feelings and emotions and connecting with someone is the most healing thing you can do, especially a week after your dad's died. And the fact that I could not do that was so... I thought I knew despair until those 12 days. I kind of want to end this happily.
It sounds like you really experienced deep despair in those 12 days. And that after discharge, your body and mind were reacting to what happened, to that deep trauma of what happened in hospital. Where did you find hope? Or have you found hope?
What brings me hope? Fuck. What brings me hope is the hope that the shittiest parts of my life can be useful to others in some way and can be useful to changing a system, because the positive parts in my life can also be useful too. And what brings me hope... Well, I'm alive, but now I'm kind of happy that I didn't die. I'm actually happy I didn't die. It took a while. It took a long while. And I'm creating, I'm painting, I'm making this podcast. And the one thing that we know is true is that there's a future that we can never imagine. And the one thing my life experience has taught me is I've had an extraordinary life. I've had the most exceptionally interesting things happen and the most horrendous things happen. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. There's some things I'd rather not have happened, but you know what? Fuck, life can be fascinating. It can be really fucking fascinating. And yeah, what brings me hope? I don't know. I feel okay to be uncertain. I feel okay with this sort of... What brings me hope is that I know that the system really can work and change people's lives, and it has for me. And I know that it can damage people's lives sometimes irreparably, and it hasn't for me. And I know that people care. And I know that no one wants anyone to die alone from their hands in despair. I don't. No one wants to. We're all on the same page. And I just know that there's different pressures from clinicians, from hospitals, from the government, from us, that sometimes, although we have the same goal, our ways of achieving that can be at loggerheads. I don't know. I hope that this gives someone a feeling of relatability. I don't know.
I'm glad you didn't die too. I'm really glad we're in this room, in your living room, having this conversation. And I'm really glad other people are going to hear this conversation. The world needs more people like you.
A few weeks after discharging from hospital, Leon shared his story with Dr. Sophie Isabel, a clinician and researcher who works for the mental health system and advocates for much-needed change. She reflects with Leon on his story and how it sits with other people's experiences of harm at the hands of the system that's supposed to support them at their most challenging times.
My friend Sophie is now sitting in the living room. Sophie, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Sophie Isabel. I am a clinician and a researcher. I work in mental health services, and I've been researching for a long time harm that occurs in the course of care in mental health services, and particularly how services can become more trauma-informed and if that's possible.
So my first question is, you've just heard the interview and the experience I went through. Is that an aberration, or is it common, or what does the research suggest?
I have just heard your story, and it's a powerful story, and it makes me sad to hear your story. It also makes me sad to say that I don't think it's an aberration, that the experience that you're describing of being harmed or traumatized in the course of receiving care is something that we know happens across mental health services across the world. There's a term, iatrogenic harm, which sort of refers to that coming in to hospital to receive care and being harmed in the course of it, a bit like if you came into hospital and picked up an infection while you were in the hospital, which we also know happens. We've got a whole lot of procedures and policies around hospital-acquired infections and how to prevent them and how to respond to them. And hospital-acquired trauma or iatrogenic harm is our mental health equivalent of that, and it's not uncommon. The word aberration, I don't think your experience is an aberration. I think your experience is unique, and how iatrogenic harm occurs isn't always the same, which I guess is a little bit different to a hospital-acquired infection. We can't just use these exact universal precautions and people won't be harmed in the course of care. But it's also extremely common, I think. And things can be two things at once. So you were talking about two quite distinct experiences. And I think sometimes people have a bit of both. That we did some research quite a few years ago of interviewing people in an acute inpatient unit who talked about how you could actually get better or, experience positive outcomes of care at the same time as being harmed from it. I think some of the stuff that's being done around trauma-informed approaches to care or how to prevent iatrogenic harm or trauma happening in the course of care is based on understandings of the dynamics of these things too, that sometimes it's not the overt thing that happens to you, just like any trauma, but the dynamics surrounding it. So what makes things traumatic is experiences of fear and helplessness and betrayal, and often in relationships with other humans who you're expecting to look after you or provide care or be trustworthy. And I think some of what you were describing in your story is that kind of sense of misuses of power that happens in trauma, that if you leave, then we'll do this, or, that you couldn't really trust people, that you felt stuck. And there was a sense of betrayal that you'd come for help and then you were being harmed, which to me is all of those dynamics of trauma being replicated in care. So even if there's not one big thing that happens or one particular overt act of violence, you've been harmed through the course of care. I think you're right in saying that it's hard to imagine a way out of that. Like you're talking about a broken system. The bed block that you talked about at the beginning of your story is a symptom of a broken system. It's hard to get into mental health services. It's hard to get help when you need it. And then sometimes when they're in, it's really hard to get out. And there aren't enough beds, and then people are in beds for long periods of time, and there's not places for people to be discharged to receive the care that they need. People are sitting in emergency departments or general health settings. And it has a kind of knock-on effect that every bit of the system is stressed, and it's sort of hard to see beyond the bit of what is happening right in front of you. So I think you're right. People don't come to work to cause harm. It's hard to even identify maybe exactly who or what caused that harm to you, but the whole experience equated to a iatrogenic trauma, which takes a bit of time to even process. At the time, you probably, ironically, focused on survival, even though you weren't actually sure you wanted to survive at that moment. But it's about how to get out of this situation. And then once you're out, reflect a bit more on the dynamics of what happened to me and what was that about.
You described it well, because it wasn't, when you were talking, I was thinking of, it's almost like the Stanford prison experiment, though that's got its own flaws. But you start performing the role of the helpless, vulnerable, ignorant patient, and they, knowing that they are kind of your parole officers, so that your care meetings are kind of like parole meetings, where you have to prove yourself sane enough, or I don't know, you don't know what the rules are to leave. You start believing that of yourself. Like, that's how it is like gaslighting. You start believing yourself a weak, vulnerable, crazy person who shouldn't be listened to.
Yes, which to me is a result of that misuse of power. And again, thinking about those interviews I did years ago with people in inpatient units, they talked about figuring out ways to play the game. So that kind of, don't show too much emotion, don't express your frustration when things don't go your way, be quiet, but don't be too quiet. Make sure you come out. And these are the kind of steps that we can all do to get out of here with the least amount of harm happening, which is devastating to hear. I mean, amazing that there is this underground network of sharing information about that, but not what we want for people coming at times when they're feeling really crap.
It's so true that you say that. After this absurd 12 days in bed block, I was finally taken to the psychiatric wing, where I spent 2 nights. So miraculously, I must have been healed because I got discharged. Now, I spent those 2 days meeting with other patients and speaking with them, and many have been through the same experience. They said I, did something suicidal perhaps. Then I was in this bed for days and days and days. And so, we played the game. I said, okay, if as we're talking, no matter what, we need to be in the view of nurses, and we need to laugh every 30 seconds, even though we talk about wanting to kill ourselves. And we have to make sure we comb our hair and dress nice and smile and present. And I call it, I went from Guy Smiley, the charismatic one, to Marilyn Monroe, ditzy, but deeply intelligent underneath. So, you're right. And you agree with everything the psychiatrists say, even though they're vastly inaccurate. They even got my address wrong, but I didn't disagree. I just said, cool, yeah. And you finally have after being unable to sleep for 12 days, after 2 good nights of sleep, I had the wherewithal to be able to lie. And that's what got me out.
I'm only laughing because, yes, that's the sign that you're able to leave the hospital, is when you can play the game to perform the act to get out. What do you think about that? I think it's also that real divide of us and them, this sense that there's, even if we take down the glass around staff stations in inpatient units and alter the environment, that there's still a exertion of power. That means there's a real separation between people who are accessing care, people who are providing that care, and there isn't any safety. Like what you're describing is this lack of psychological safety to be yourself, or to say what you're really thinking, or to talk about what you're feeling in relation to wanting to die or not wanting to die, which is the last thing that we want from mental health services. So how we've got to this point is complex and messy, and how we're going to get out of it is also complex. I think hearing your first story about a positive experience gives me hope, because actually as a researcher, spending my whole time looking into the shadows of mental health services, I can forget that people can have positive experiences of care, that actually sometimes it does work and it isn't all broken. And if we can just focus on amplifying more of that as alongside doing less of the harm and making sure that we acknowledge it. Ironically, in a service obsessed with risk, we're not addressing the risk of iatrogenic harm in our care in the same way that the general hospitals are around infections, etc. What do we need to do to minimize harm occurring in the course of care? It needs to be a priority of how we deliver that care. And I think thinking about what that would look like there's hopelessness is such a terrible state, and for people in services and for the services themselves, thinking what gives us hope, what would a possible mental health service look like that didn't have iatrogenic harm, or when that occurred, addressed it, acknowledged it, talked about it, and put reparative actions into place. Because I think some of it is subtle. Sometimes what is traumatic to people isn't really apparent, or we can't prevent all harm, I guess. But I think if we can acknowledge and talk about and do reparative actions, then we know that reduces the sustained effects of that harm upon people in their lives.
I'm glad you said that. I finally, as you can see and hear, I can talk, which was nice. And when I was in the hospital, because I was quite, I'd say, hypervigilant about trying to resolve, get out of here, all that stuff. And I actually took thorough notes about every day. And it was only a few weeks ago I thought, actually, I've got all the material I need for a really cool news article or a really cool complaint. So I chose option B. So what happened to me is being investigated by the hospital and taken quite seriously. And there's a series of meetings that are going on. And there was an apology that went something like, "We're so sorry you went through that." And my response was, to supercharge an apology, I need a few things. I need you to say exactly what you are apologizing for. I need you to acknowledge the effect it had on me. And I need to know in detail what you're doing to make sure that never happens again. Then I will accept your apology. But at this point, I will just acknowledge you have tried to apologize.
First of all, I'm really glad that you did find words and put that complaint in. I think that takes, I imagine it took energy, but it's often, I think people are so scared and relieved to have got out that they don't want to think about it or talk about it. But these stories are important for drawing attention to what happens to people in care. I'm sorry that you didn't get the targeted apology for exactly what happened to you and the effects of that upon you. And so what's going to happen next?
Well, they thought we were just going to have one meeting, and I corrected them. I said, look, this has just scratched the surface and I've got a lot more to say. And being client-centred, as is your policy, we're going to have as many meetings as it will take to resolve this. So we've got 2 more coming up, and we'll see what happens. I've got a list of things that I would like to happen out of that, but I don't want to get into too much detail about the investigation. but yeah, it hasn't. This is the beginning. This is the beginning. And I think, it needs to go further. You know, the minister needs to know about bed block. The federal minister needs to know about what happens when you get rid of people's Medicare sessions. You know, hospital bed's much more expensive than 10 Medicare sessions, for example, to be funded by a psychologist. So there's things that need to be done, but what many other people do, and I've seen it so many times, is they'll go into hospital and the psychiatrist usually convince someone that they'll need different medication regime, and they'll come out often on an antipsychotic with less cognitive capacity and don't make that complaint. And when I told them that I actually am studying 2 master's degrees, one in health communication and one in media practice, I did get a lot of eyeball rolls. And now they realise they got the wrong guy. So I'm happy to say now I've got my brain back. They've got the wrong guy.
But also I think the power of what you're doing in putting a voice to this for so many people who can't talk about it or don't have a voice or don't know where to take those experiences after they've got out or are still in power relationships with the mental health service and can't talk about it. It's really powerful. So thank you for putting yourself on the line for this one. I guess the other thing I was thinking just then when you were talking was around how things like the Mental Health Act get used in ways that exert power, so that you were a voluntary patient, but then if you were to leave, you would be made involuntary.
I guess, since leaving the hospital, what has happened is continued friendships with several of the people I met over the 2 days in the psych wards, and that actually got me fired up slowly. But I think that's where the spark was reignited, because it was gone when I was in that psychosis ward. And so, yeah, that lit the spark. And so I thought, you just got to do something. Because doing nothing would be, to me, just devastating for me. I had to do something.
Thanks for tuning in.
It's a Minefield is produced by Chris Jaeger,
Hannah Achilles,
And Leon Fernandes.
audio by Lockie Hilda.
We're kindly supported by the Mental Health Commission of New South Wales. You can reach out to us at iamf.org.au.
And remember, we're all in this together.